There's this weird moment where everything starts to feel off, but nothing around you actually changed. Your job is still your job. Your room looks the same. The people in your life are acting like they always do, but something in you, quietly, is like, this can't be it. And you can't explain it to anyone, because technically, you've got nothing to complain about. But things feel fake. Not fake like a lie. Fake like you're watching a version of your life play out and you're not really in it. That's not a glitch. That's your signal. That's your mind starting to separate from the autopilot it's been running on for years. Most people never make it past that point. The discomfort hits and they run. Back into routine, back into noise, back into doing. Because here's the truth no one likes to hear. Everything you know feels real until you finally look at it without the lens you built to survive. Your reactions, half of them aren't even yours. They're leftovers from your childhood. Your opinions, mostly repeated patterns from the people who raised you or the people who hurt you. The way you talk to yourself when no one's around, that voice, it's probably not even yours. It's something you absorbed, and it became the background music to your whole identity. And here's the thing, you can keep going like this for your entire life. Most people do. They never slow down long enough to ask, is any of this real? Or is this just what I've accepted as normal? Because that's the trap. Reality, until you question it, isn't reality. It's programming. And unless you break that, you'll keep playing the same role in the same environment, reacting the same way, calling it life, but never actually living. It's not dramatic. It doesn't happen in some big breakdown. It happens in quiet, strange moments. Moments where you notice you're reacting like a character you didn't choose to play. And if you felt that lately, like the world is there, but you're somewhere slightly behind it, you're closer than you think. Closer to waking up. But it doesn't happen just because you want it to. You have to actually do this one thing. You have to stop assuming that what you're seeing is real. So when you stop assuming what you're seeing is real, things start glitching. Not outside, inside. The way someone talks to you suddenly hits differently. You realize you've been tolerating a tone that makes your chest tighten, not because they changed, but because you finally noticed. You see how often you're shrinking in rooms where no one even asked you to be small. You catch the fact that you've been saying, yeah, it's fine, about things that clearly aren't. And it's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's just that your body starts rejecting the version of life you built to keep other people comfortable. You walk into a place you used to love and feel nothing. You listen to a friend talk and suddenly realize they've never really asked about you. You get a text from someone and your stomach turns, not because of them, but because of who you become when you're around them. That's when you realize the version of reality you've been living in wasn't based on truth. It was based on comfort, familiarity, repetition. And now that you're waking up, that version stops working. You start saying no more often, not in a defiant way, in a final way. Like your nervous system is done playing along with what doesn't fit. You start pausing before you speak. Not because you're scared, but because for the first time, you actually want to hear yourself before the world hears you. And slowly, the masks fall off. You're not as funny in some rooms. You're not as agreeable in others. You stop adjusting your tone to make other people less uncomfortable with your truth. And it's weird, because at first you feel like you're losing parts of yourself. But really, you're just peeling off the layers you built out of survival. And underneath those layers, there's still a you. Quieter, stronger, less reactive, more honest. This doesn't mean your life gets perfect. It means it gets real. Finally. Because once you start seeing through the version of reality you used to believe in, you stop trying to perform peace and start learning what it actually feels like. And that's when it begins. Not the escape, but the return. Here's what nobody tells you about waking up. It's not always peaceful. It's awkward, disorienting, lonely sometimes, because once you see things clearly, you can't unsee them. And now, You're in this weird middle space, not asleep anymore, but not fully rooted in who you're becoming yet either. You'll try to explain it to people, and they'll look at you like you're being dramatic. You'll feel yourself pulling away from certain conversations because they're so surface level, it almost hurts. You'll find yourself laughing less, not because you're sad, but because the things you used to fake, laugh at, suddenly sound empty. And part of you will question if you're broken, but you're not. You're just no longer hypnotized by the version of life that used to keep you distracted. You're noticing things now. How much of what people call normal is just numbing? How many conversations are just two people trying to sound okay? How often people cling to chaos just to avoid feeling quiet? And now that you see it, you can't play dumb anymore. You can't force yourself back into the version of you that was fine with all of this. You can't pretend that certain people still inspire you when they don't. You can't sit in rooms that drain you and call it connection. You don't hate these people. You don't resent the old version of your life. You just feel done, not in an angry way, in a "this chapter is closed" kind of way. And what replaces all that noise? Stillness. Not the Instagram version of stillness, candles and ocean sounds, the real kind. You wake up and don't rush to check your phone. You sit with yourself without needing to fix anything. You stop narrating your every thought to yourself, like you're being watched. You stop proving. And it's weird at first, because your ego will panic. It'll scream that you're slipping, that you're disconnected, that you should be doing more. But that's just the part of you that only knew how to survive through tension. It's not gone yet, it's just losing power. Because now there's space, real space. And in that space, something quiet begins to grow. Not excitement, not confidence, just a steady kind of knowing that you're finally showing up as the one thing you've never really had permission to be, yourself. The craziest part? Once you stop playing your old role, the world doesn't know how to react to you. People treat you differently. Not because they've changed, but because your energy isn't bending around theirs anymore. You walk into the same rooms, but you don't shrink this time. You speak, and your voice doesn't tremble with the need to be liked. You say no without following it up with a fake excuse. You let things end without needing to control how you're remembered. And at first it throws people off. The ones who are used to your softness, your availability, your constant emotional labor. They might pull away. They might call you distant, cold, changed. And they're right. You are changed. You're no longer filtering your truth through someone else's comfort. You're no longer available for conversations that go nowhere. You're no longer interested in carrying the emotional weight for people who refuse to look at their own reflection. You don't say these things out loud. You don't need to. Your energy speaks for itself now. And here's what happens. Life starts moving, not in a chaotic way, not in a dramatic explosion. It moves with you, quietly but clearly. Opportunities that once felt locked suddenly open. Not because you forced them, but because you're finally aligned with the version of yourself who was meant to receive them. Some people leave, but others arrive. People who don't flinch at your boundaries. People who don't need you to dim down to feel big. People who hear the quiet in you and meet it with their own. You stop chasing, and life stops running. Because when you're rooted in your clarity, when your yes and your no both come from a place of stillness, you stop confusing movement with progress. You no longer mistake chaos for meaning. You don't need to prove your value through how much you suffer for others. You stop assigning importance to people just because they've been around. And life responds to that. It reorganizes, because reality isn't fixed. It bends, not to your demands, but to your frequency. And when your energy stops performing, stops pleasing, stops pretending, reality stops reflecting the version of you that was built on fear. You meet life as yourself. And for the first time, life meets you back. At some point, without even noticing it, you stop being obsessed with how people see you. Not because you suddenly feel invincible, not because you figured everything out, but because you're too focused on how you feel around them. You used to walk into a room and immediately scan for safety. Now you walk in and scan for alignment. Does this conversation feed me or drain me? Does this connection support me or stretch me thin? Does this version of me feel honest or like a watered down performance? And that becomes your filter. Not status, not approval, not what will they think, but how does this feel in my body right now? And it changes everything. You stop posting things for validation. You stop oversharing just to prove you're self-aware. You stop performing calm when you're actually overstimulated and done. You start moving slower, not because you're lazy, but because you finally realize urgency was a trauma response. You don't need to answer text within seconds. You don't need to jump to help when someone's uncomfortable. You don't need to soften your tone just to make someone else feel less triggered by your clarity. And what's wild is, you don't announce any of this. You don't go on some big, I'm protecting my peace now monologue. You just shift. Subtle, internal, quiet, but real. You take longer to respond. You stop explaining your no. You walk away when conversations feel hollow. You let people misunderstand you, and you don't circle back to fix it. Not because you're better, not because you've stopped caring, but because you've stopped outsourcing your sense of stability to people who wouldn't know what to do with it anyway. And the more you live from that place, the less drained you are, because you realize that most of your exhaustion had nothing to do with how busy you were. It came from constantly pretending to be fine, pretending to be interested, pretending to be the version of yourself that other people could easily digest. Now, you're not interested in being digestible. You're interested in being real. And for the first time, you're not asking life to slow down so you can catch up. You're slowing down on your own, and life adjusts. And then there's this moment where you look around at your life, and you realize how quiet it's gotten. Not lonely, not empty, just quiet. There's less noise, fewer obligations you don't mean, fewer conversations that leave you feeling like you betrayed your own energy. You're not rushing from one thing to the next. You're not pretending to be interested just to keep the mood light. You're not constantly scanning for someone else's approval like it's oxygen. And at first, that stillness feels suspicious, like you're missing something, like maybe you've forgotten to care about something that used to eat up your thoughts. But the truth is, you haven't forgotten anything. You've just outgrown it. And now that you're not filling your life with chaos, with over-explaining, with invisible effort, you finally have space to feel what's real. You notice the details you used to miss, how your body relaxes in certain spaces, how your mind slows down in silence, how you're more creative, more grounded, more available to yourself. You don't force connections anymore. You let energy do the talking. If it feels off, you trust that. If it feels right, you move with it, slowly, deliberately, without the desperation to lock it down. Because when you stop chasing certainty, you start making space for trust. Not blind trust in other people, but trust in your response, your intuition, your ability to handle life without controlling it into submission. You stop reading into every delay. You stop tying your value to someone else's reaction. You stop needing the next moment to prove your worth. And that's the shift most people never get to, because it's not loud, it's not flashy, there's no applause. Just this quiet awareness. I don't need to fight with life anymore. You don't even need a reason, not a list of healed wounds, not a final breakthrough. You just know, on some deep level, you're done being at war with yourself. And from that place, everything that isn't real begins to fall away, effortlessly. Because the moment you stop holding it up, it can't stand on its own. Not the fake identities, not the emotional overreaching, not the relationships built on guilt, not the habits built on fear. When you're no longer the one holding the illusion together, it collapses. And what's left isn't nothing. It's you, clear, unperformed, unedited, still here. So now you know. Nothing around you is truly real until you pause long enough to see what's actually there. Not what you were taught to see, not what your fears want you to see, not what survival trained you to believe, but what's actually there, beneath all the layers. And you don't need to make a big move to get there. You don't need to quit your job, cut everyone off, or have some dramatic awakening. You just need to stop running from the space where clarity lives. Let it be quiet. Let it be awkward. Let it be unfamiliar, because that's where your real life begins. Not when everything finally makes sense, but when you finally stop trying to make it make sense and just see it as it is, as you are. If this video hit something in you, if you know you're starting to see through the version of life that no longer fits, comment the word "see." Just that. No explanation, no performance. Just see. Let's see who else is awake.